Welcome to your video walkthrough for Lesson 3, Considering Argument, Context, Audience, and Purpose. This is Mrs. Bomey, here to guide you through this week's lesson. So, pretty simple objective this week. We want you to be able to determine the author's motivation and purpose in writing an argument. A vocabulary review for you. We've got the word context, which means the circumstances, what was going on at the time. This could be the time period, it could be the place, it could be certain characteristics of the society. There's a lot of things that can go into context. And it's important to remember that context can shift. It does shift as times change and values change and situations change. We have to always look at them through the lens of context, because when we take things out of context, it's easy to misinterpret them. Another important vocabulary word is audience. These are the individuals or groups that the author or the speaker is talking directly to. For example, you, the West Hills High School juniors, are my audience. I'm explaining the slide deck in a very different way than I would explain it if my audience were other teachers, or even if I were explaining it to your parents. It's designed to help you complete the tasks that you need. For your parents, there might not be enough information because they don't necessarily understand the previous lessons that we've done. They don't know how Google Classroom works, etc. So they would need more information. And for teachers, they might need, I hope they would need, a whole lot less explanation of some things. So within the context, I hope to explain it in a way that's appropriate for my particular audience. And then purpose, you know that word, it just means the intended reason for doing something. What am I hoping to accomplish? With this walkthrough video, I'm hoping to give you some extra support and instruction since we don't get to see you 5 days a week in class. And I want to make sure that some of your questions that we're anticipating will be answered so that you can keep working from home and be successful until we see you in class next. So the first thing we want to start thinking about are the 5 W's. And you know these words. These are the questioning words. You've seen them used lots of different times. You use them yourselves. But particularly in this context of argument, I'm going to use the vocabulary a lot, so get used to it. In the context of discussing argument, the first W is going to be for the subject of the argument. What is the author or the speaker talking about? The when and the where, those are going to contribute, as I said, to context. For whom was this argument written? That's our audience, the target of this. And lastly, of course, is purpose. Why was the argument written? What was the author hoping to accomplish? So continuing to think about this, you've got over here on the right-hand side a just little screen cap excerpt from the article that we gave you. You can also go back and look at the article. It should be in read-only mode for you in Google Classroom. So one of the things we want to do is just look at the basic information that's available to us. Look for the title. In this case, it's Escaping from Poverty, and see if you can figure out what the article is really about. Well, you have a pretty good idea based on the words. Unless the author's being clever or tricky, you have a very good idea that it's about the concept of poverty. And you might be thinking, well, maybe it's about how people did get out of poverty, or maybe it's about ways that we can look at to help people get out of poverty. Both of those would be pretty good guesses. Then we want to look at where it was published. For this article, it's in the New York Times, and we're going to examine that more deeply later. You might be familiar with some of our various news outlets and different reputations that go along with each of them. Yes, where something is published matters. It matters to its credibility. It matters to the audience that it might reach. And those are things that we have to explore. Additionally, we want to look at when something was published. Sometimes that's particularly important. This article is not that old in the grand scheme of articles. It's from 10 years ago. Imagine, though, if we were looking at an article published in the New York Times on poverty and it was written March 24th, 1950. We'd be looking at information that's 70 years out of date. That could still be useful for us. It could tell us a lot about perhaps how far America has come in terms of escaping from poverty, but it wouldn't give us a very modern look at how things are. This article, even though it's 10 years old, and that seems like a very old article to some of you, because it's more than half your lifetime, it's still a relatively recent article. And so we can give it some credibility in terms of the information not being too far out of date. Okay, so our next task, step 2, is to get you thinking like an author. So in Google Classroom, you have the handout that you see on the right, and we're asking you to consider the importance of audience, context, and purpose. For this slideshow and the handouts related to it, we've selected 3 new colors to help you keep track of things. So just like last time, claim was in that bright blue color. Audience is in this, it's supposed to be kind of a light red color, not quite pink. Context will be referenced in purple, and purpose is in that blue color. It's called cornflower blue. But we want to look at audience, context, and purpose in our article, Escaping from Poverty. There are 2 constructed responses that you're going to give. Constructed responses, as it mentions down here, is something that you will be doing in the CASP test in the spring. So it's great to be able to get some practice in on it now. The way we've set this handout up is we've provided you, if you want it, with some sentence frames to help guide your responses. You're not required to use them. You can freeform your answer if you would like, but you need to make sure that your answer still addresses the same points that it would otherwise address if you use these sentence frames. So the first question is, what would a writer want to know about his audience when trying to convince that audience of an idea or action? And you're going to go through and replace all of these little blanks with writing. You could write a word for some of them. Some of them might require many words or even possibly additional sentences. You're welcome to change the font and the spacing, whatever, in order to make your answer fit well. But please remember, we don't want this to be more than 1 document long. So if you hit the page break, you need to reduce some things down. You could even go through and reduce this portion of the question, make it a little bit smaller font, because what your teachers really want to see in the end is your answers, not the handout that we put together. So make sure it all fits on 1 sheet of paper. If we were going to print it, it would all need to fit on 1 paper. The second question is to think about where the article was published. Why would where the article is published really matter? So for us, we're specifically responding to Article 1. And remember, it tells us right here that it was published in the New York Times. So for this support system, you're going to remove anything that looks like this. So here, 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 here. Those are just guides to help you know what you should put in the blank next. So this would say, additionally, by publishing in, and then instead of this blank, you would list the name of the publication where Article 1 was published and keep the comma, and then you would put the author's full name, first and last, is able to reach. And here you put in what type of people you think he was trying to reach. And then the last part is, by publishing there in this source, he's not going to be getting to certain types of people. So who is he not going to reach by publishing in the New York Times, and why is he not going to reach those particular people? Again, this graphic organizer is in Google Classroom for you this week. Next, we want to think about some of the characteristics of audience, look a little deeper into it. There's a lot to consider with audience. We've given you some questions to ponder here, and that's going to continue on to this page. So we want you to explore the World Wide Web. Get out on the internet and take a look at what are some of the things that writers and marketing people consider when they are trying to identify audience. So I'd like for you to go to this site, and take a look at some of the categories and the characteristics. You might be surprised by how many different things people consider and how many different components go together to defining audience. Then I want you to give some thought to the fact that most of what you've written in your life has been written for school, which means it's been written for a teacher. So you have a pretty good idea of how to write for that particular audience. But this week, we're going to give you an assignment when your audience, at least your primary audience, is not your teacher. Yes, your teachers will be evaluating your work, but the audience that you're writing to this week's persuasive letter to is not going to be your teacher, and it's going to be peer edited by your classmates. So you're going to have a few other audiences at play before it gets to your teacher for evaluation. One final example here for audience is this component that talks about the company H&R Block. So H&R Block does tax preparation. They help you fill out your income tax returns and send it in and help you get your refund. They offer some other services too. But take a look at all of these different areas that they consider when they're trying to figure out how to market toward their target audience. So one of the things they look at is demographics. They're looking at people with mid to upper income in the 30 to 60 year range who are married with kids and own a home. Well, that's not you, right? But still, they have a very particular group that they're marketing to. So when you see an advertisement for H&R Block or hear something on radio or something like that, and you don't really care about it, that's okay with them because they don't really care about you. They care about people who are a heck of a lot older than you and who are married and own a home and have a lot of income and maybe have more complicated tax returns. They're thinking about their clients in that way. They're also looking for particular types of people. They're looking for people who often take on DIY, that's do it yourself, projects instead of paying for services. So they want to find people who don't usually like to pay other folks to do things, who usually say, I can figure out and do it myself. And they want to change those people's minds and get them to become H&R Block clients. So they know specifically who they're trying to get. They've looked at demographics, psychographics, meaning what's going on in the people's brains, like what motivates them and gets them moving. They want to know about their attitudes or their feelings toward the product. They want to know how they behave, what their needs are. Needs are another way of looking at psychographics. So here it says that, they're motivated to save, and here it's why they're saving. And then what is a problem that they have that H&R Block could offer a solution to? You probably don't think about marketing in such a complicated way, but the things we receive in our mailboxes, both our real mailboxes in our homes or our email boxes, the ads that pop up for us in Spotify or on Netflix, these are all the products of people gathering information from our behaviors, especially in this digital world, and trying to figure out who we are so that if we fit their audience profile, they can try to sell their product to us. They can try to offer their service to us. Audience is very, very complicated. We're not going to get quite to the level that H&R Block has done here, but I just want you to be thinking about that and understand that this is a very complex issue, and it's not just for writing in your English class. It has implications in a lot of different fields. Okay, so now we're ready to think specifically about the source of our article, of Christoph's article. And it was published in the New York Times. We provided you with a link so that you can hop over to the New York Times to their online edition. They do, of course, offer a print edition. So there's some things that you can think about. Is your source material printed or is it an online source? Print material can't really be changed, doesn't have the opportunity for updating like an online source would, but It's still something to think about. Doesn't mean just because it's in print that it's no good. The New York Times offers both. And the reality is that what you might find in today's printed New York Times could be different than some of what you see in their online version. The editors will have made decisions about which pieces should run on which platform in order to, you got it, be the best thing for that audience, right? There's certain things about people who like a print paper, and they're probably going to try to aim some of that stuff at them. And then there's people that like the online access. So they're going to make different decisions about what gets posted where. Another thing to consider is how often does the publication come out? Newspapers, every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Some magazines, they come out once a month or 4 times a year. Journals, like scholarly journals where research and so forth is published, those could be even rarer in how often the material comes out. So it's something for you to think about, because the longer it takes for the information to come out, the more out of date it might be. It takes a while to put things together. Another thing to think about is how many people subscribe to it. This is a big thing with YouTubers, right? They want to have as many subscribers as possible. They're always telling you, click subscribe, click subscribe. Not easy for me to say, but you get the idea. Lots of people subscribing to something doesn't necessarily mean it's a good source. Could just be a lot of people that got duped, right? But at least it lets you know, and it's not just Joe's channel that has 5 subscribers, or just a few people that are getting the information. The more people that are looking at something, the more likely it is that errors can be found and corrections can be made. Another thing to consider is it free? That's an interesting thing to consider, because if you have to pay for information, then sometimes publishers are inclined to give the audience what they want. If something is free, the publisher might not feel the requirement and just say, I don't care if you like it or not, this is what I'm publishing, and this is what you get. A kind of flip side to that could be, are the contributors, the people who write the material in the newspaper in this case, are they being paid for their content, or are they creating it for free? So it doesn't necessarily give something more or less credibility. It's all part of the pieces that go together to build the context of the article. And the last thing that we want you to consider is what education level is needed to access the content. You can see this screen cap of the New York Times page. You should be able to read everything that's on there, but this is just a portion of it. Is the material very scholarly and specific and challenging, and therefore would have a much more limited audience? Or is it pretty wide access? So something for you to think about. Now, you should be taking the time now to pause and go and check out the New York Times, see what's on the website today, what's on their front page, scroll all the way down, look at all of the options. In this version that you can see right now, there's very little there on the opinion side on the right, but when I was looking at it earlier today, there were more than 20 opinion pieces on the right. Also, if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, you can see their major categories and all of their subcategories that they cover underneath. It'll help give you a much broader idea of what the answers to some of the questions are that you see on this page. Once you've done that, it's time for you to pause and take the quiz in Google Classroom. It's 4 questions, multiple guess. There is 1 answer option for each one. You're going to want to keep this up so you can come back and take a look at the page and just double reference it before you answer the questions. Please be aware there are no corrections when you submit the form. That is your final answer. So make sure that you've done all of the questions and answered them completely and correctly, including selecting the right period. If this is quarter 1, you should be selecting periods 1 or 3 or 5. If this is quarter 2, you should only be selecting periods 2, 4, or 6. Okay, the quiz is done. I hope you did well on it. Step 6, we're going to look at the author's intention or the author's purpose, just another way of saying the same thing. There's 3 good breakdowns that you can use for author's purpose. The first one is, what knowledge does he want us to impart upon us? What information does he want to give us? The next thing is, what kind of emotional reaction is the author going for? What do they want us to feel or experience during or after reading their piece? And then the last thing is, what kind of action are they trying to get us to take? That could be having us do something differently or feel something differently or think differently about a topic, or it could be to have us continue to do or think or feel in a particular way. So taking a look back at the Article 1, please don't unsubmit it, but you can take a look at it in read-only view. What are some of the words that Christoph includes that let us know how he personally feels about this issue? It is an opinion piece, which means his feelings or his biases are going to show up in the piece. He's not trying to hide that he feels a certain way about something. So what words can you identify that let us know exactly how Christoph is intending for us to get knowledge, to feel about things, or to take action going forward? This assignment, the 5 W's, is step 7 for you. We want you to think about that op-ed and look at it through the lenses of context, audience, and purpose. Now, there is a walkthrough for this. It's not actually embedded. You won't click here. There's a link that says a video walkthrough that you'll need to click on, and it will take you to YouTube channel and you can see the walkthrough. It's about an 8-minute walkthrough that goes through and explains. Please note the color coding. As I mentioned earlier, the context section is here in purple, the audience section is here in light red, and the purpose section is the last part in blue. So you see these 3 here, ideas to know, feelings, and actions. They are, the knowledge is the ideas to know, feelings, and actions that we just went over. So this assignment is in the Google Classroom for you, the organizer is, so you can go there now if you'd like, watch the video walkthrough by clicking here, and then complete this assignment. Okay, now it's your turn to think about your feelings. So you're going to do a short informal writing where you're going to talk about Christoph's ideas and your own feelings. So we've differentiated this with this font for Christoph's ideas and this one for your own feelings. So there's some sentence frames here that can help you out. And the assignment actually looks like this. It's just a tiny little screenshot of it. It's located in Google Classroom and it's called Reflecting on Audience, Context, and Purpose in Article 1, Escaping from Poverty. You're going to write your answer up here in this box, but I've provided, as you can see, here's the little sentence starters. They're right down here, and the stuff from the next slide is also on the document. So the bottom half under this box here is actually optional. You don't need it. If you don't need it, you don't have to use it. And you're going to write your answer in here and include your word count. But here's a bigger version of it. So you can finish off these sentence starters in order to get you going with your writing. Please don't write, Christoph argues that, blah, 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 period. Christoph believes that, blah, 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 period. Please don't just do that. These are just intended to get you started so that you can continue to explain Christoph's feelings and ideas. An excellent thing to do here would be to reference some of the words that he uses in order to prove your point. But this is supposed to be a pretty informal writing, so please don't do a lot of research and pull out a whole bunch of quotes and really do a bunch of evidence and explanation. That's not where we want you to go. We just want you to be thinking about what Christoph was thinking about. The next slide is going to continue talking about how you could express your feelings. There are lots of choices here. Please pay attention to this. You don't need to use all of these. You can pick the ones that suit you, or if you'd like to write your own, that's fine. And remember, this is a continuation from the previous slide, and you're going to continue in this handout to address the slide you're currently viewing and this one here. Now that your reflection's done, it's time to write the persuasive letter. And we're going to be going over this in class with you. You know how to argue. Read through this scenario here and just pause the video for a moment and read through this scenario. It should ring fairly familiar to you. When you're done reading it, unpause and we'll keep going. So now you get to practice writing a persuasive letter, and you're going to keep audience, purpose, and context in mind. Those are our focus points. You're going to pick one topic from the second to last slide in this slide deck. We've curated 6 different topics for you to write on. Once you've selected your topic, and choose wisely, because once you commit to it, that is your topic, not just for this week, but for many weeks coming. So make sure you get the one you want to write about. You're going to use the business letter template that's in Google Classroom to help you actually draft your letter. Now, some of you I know want to hop in and you want to pick your topic and you want to start writing your letter, but I encourage you to please slow down and wait on that until after we go through our first class of the week, because your teachers are going to go over the template with you and make sure that you're clear on the expectations before you start writing. Also, don't jump ahead and just pick your topic yet. You want to understand what the task is to make sure that the topic is something that you're going to be able to apply onto the task. Writing the letter. This is going to be a really simple letter with an introduction and just 1, possibly 2 body paragraphs, depending on how you structure it, and a brief conclusion. You're not trying to write a big, crazy letter, okay? Take a look at this sample here. This is not a topic that we're offering up, but it gives you a good example of what your letter should look like. So we want to start by addressing the person, Dear Mr. Smith, and then we're going to use a colon, the 2 little dots here. And here's what our author has written. As a graduating senior of Dallas Center High School, I understand your position on the school board to consider making community service for graduation, mandatory for graduation. Now, here, this information shows that our writer, mystery student, no name has been given yet, right? The student didn't need to do that. He established credibility by saying he's a graduating senior and which school he went to. Hasn't revealed his name or anything else. By doing that, he's keeping the reader, Mr. Smith, focused on the topic. Mr. Smith knows that this is a student in the district that he's on the school board for, but doesn't know anything more specific other than the students at Dallas Center High School. This is a good strategy if you don't want to reveal yourself too soon, especially if you're worried about being judged. The author established credibility. Hey, I'm a senior in your school district, but didn't give away anything more than that. So here we know the specific audience. It's Mr. Smith. He's on the school board. Our author is showing, I know you, I know who I'm talking to, I've done my research, please take me seriously. Then he says, as a volunteer board member, you know that it builds civic responsibility and will prepare students for the real world. Please consider my student perspective when making this decision for teenagers. So again, more information. I know you're a volunteer board member to show that he knows who his audience is. This one we're going to keep short, 40 to 50 words, a couple of sentences. This one has 1, 2, 3 sentences. Appropriate introduction. You're not trying to put the person to sleep. You just want to let them know what you're writing about. Then you're going to get into your body paragraph. So most people are just going to be writing 1 body paragraph. It's going to explain your reasons and it's going to include evidence. Now, for this situation only, we are giving you our special blessing to make up the evidence that you're using, but it needs to be reasonable. So, for example, going back to this topic, it's about making community service mandatory for graduation. If our student here, our sample graduating senior, were writing about this, he would probably include how many hours a week he thought were reasonable hours per week. And he would probably compare that to, say, the National Key Club, which is a club that supports volunteerism, how many hours a week they recommend students can volunteer while still keeping up their other responsibilities. And if he didn't know what that number was, he could make one up. We're giving you guys permission to make it up. But it wouldn't be reasonable for him to say, National Key Club says students can volunteer 1,000 hours a week, right? That's just ludicrous. So try to think of a number that would seem reasonable to fit in. For your topics, and we'll talk about this when we get to them, if you happen to know real evidence, or if the topic really interests you and you want to go search for it, please, you have our blessing to do that. But otherwise, feel free to make up the evidence that you're going to talk about. Just keep it reasonable. And remember, it should be evidence, not just simply your opinion. You're going to begin by discussing the context. So what's happening right now that would require you to get out there and write this letter? And when you see the topics, I think you'll understand how they're all timely and you'll be able to put this together. Then explain your purpose. And remember, purpose is what you're trying to get the person to know, to feel, or to do, right? Knowledge, feelings, action. So if you've kind of forgotten what to write, go back and look at your 5 W's handout. Not necessarily so much that you're going to be replicating what Christoph did, but just to see the little breakdowns of these categories here on the far left column. That might give you an idea of some components that you might want to address. You don't have to do them all. This isn't a checklist, but it can inspire you. Okay, body paragraph. How do you organize your reasons and your evidence? Well, we're only asking for 2 reasons and 2 supporting evidence to go with them. And what we want you to do is rank them in order of your most compelling or important or powerful reason, and then your lesser one. Doesn't mean it's bad, it just means it's not as awesome as the first one. And then once you have them ranked, most important and lesser important, we'd like you to flip the order of them that you write. So actually, you're going to write about your less compelling reason first. It's sort of a warm-up and getting your reader into it. And then, bam, you're going to hit them with your awesome, most important, most powerful reason and evidence at the end. And then, like me here, you can just, poof, done, out of here. Actually, you're not quite out of here, but you're out of here as far as the body paragraph is concerned. Before you go, even though you mic dropped, we need you to write a little bit of a conclusion. You don't just want to walk off stage and leave your letter writer wondering what the heck happened. So think of this more as a little mini paragraph. It's your last opportunity to impress upon your audience that the person should take you seriously. I mean, you took your time to write this. You clearly want them to know about your feelings on the issue. And of course, your purpose is you want them to know something. Maybe it's just how you feel. You want them to feel something, and you want them to have some kind of an action, right? Some kind of a response. Maybe it's just to say, wow, I learned how that person feels, and that's another person that feels that way. Looks like there's a lot of people out there that feel that way. Maybe I should take this issue seriously. That can be a good result from writing a letter to someone. How do you wrap it up? Simply close by thanking the person for their time, saying something like, I appreciate your taking the time to read this letter, or thank you for stepping away from your other duties and listening to how I feel about this. Something like that that acknowledges and thanks the person for taking time. You took the time to write, but they took the time to read your letter. Express that you sincerely are open to talking about this. Unless you just wrote to complain, then you probably want to engage in dialogue with the person about this issue. I mean, you are writing a persuasive letter to try to change the person's mind, and you know that that can't just happen just by a letter. It's going to take some more discussion. This isn't a complaint. It's intended to persuade. So let them know that they can contact you if they'd like, and say something simply that, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. I'm looking forward to a reply. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on the matter. Some kind of nice close-up like that lets them know that their feelings are important to you. And always maintain your formal tone until the end. Sometimes people start to get a little lazy by the end of their writing, and they forget that this is a formal business persuasive letter. Just keep it together all the way until the end. All right, the moment you've been waiting for, the topics. What do you get to write about? So in step 10 here, we've provided you with 6 topics. You're going to select your topic and you're going to sign up for it in Google Class. There is a simple form in Google Classroom. It's called Topic for Persuasive Letter. And after I'm done going through these, you can go over there and you can pick the topic that you're going to want to write about. Here's something we want you to know. There's multiple sides to many arguments. And your topic here has a flip side to it. Be aware that while this week you're writing on this version, in a future week you're going to be writing another letter taking the counter position to the one you're taking this week. So for example, option 1 is to convince your school's administration to increase funding for technology. So you're going to write to the West Hills High School administration and try to explain to them why you think more of the money that we have should go to technology. In a future week, you're going to write to the West Hills High School administration and try to stop them from giving more money to technology, or possibly try to take away money from funding technology. So don't just pick something that you feel, only one way about, because you're going to have to write the other side later. It's always important to look at things from our opponent's perspective. Option 2 is to convince a group of your peers, so West Hills High School students or Grossmont Union High School students. You're not writing to kids who live in the Philippines. You're writing to your local peer group and convince them to not smoke cigarettes or vape. Option 3 is to convince the mayor of your city, and you could consider that Santee, where our school is, or if you live in another city, that's perfectly fine to consider to write to that mayor instead. And you're going to try to convince that person that curfews keep teens out of trouble. So curfews are good things. We should keep them. They help teens not get into trouble. For option 4, you're going to ask the Grossmont Union High School District School Board to change from a traditional calendar, like an August, September start and a May, June end, to a year-round schooling calendar. And we do have districts in our county that participate in year-round schooling, so you could look that up and learn a little bit about it if that interests you. Option 5 is to educate the public health officials. So we're talking in the San Diego County area about how cell phones are not dangerous. There are certainly people that believe that using cell phones can have detrimental impact on our health. The connectivity, the Wi-Fi, the battery, the contact with our bodies up against our heads, etc. It's your job to help explain to them that they're not dangerous. Now, here's a great example of a place where in making up your evidence, you want to make sure that you don't make it too silly or outrageous. Try to think of the kind of statistic that you might expect to see in an article or in a report on this particular topic. And the last one is to explain to the superintendent of your district why reopening schools to in-person instruction should be delayed. And we haven't given a time frame on this. You can decide if it's delayed a week or delayed a year or however you want to write it. And remember, you'll be writing the flip side in future weeks. So if you pick this topic, you'll be writing to Superintendent Kemper and trying to explain to her why you think schools should not delay opening and should go ahead and return to in-person instruction. So both sides of the issues will be addressed in the quarter as a whole. Okay, so if you've done all of this, it's time to start writing. In Google Classroom, open up your template and start composing your persuasive letter. It's going to be something that you're really focusing on writing starting on Tuesday and on Wednesday. And then your letter needs to be in Turnitin.com by 9 on Thursday, because on Thursday in class, we are going to be going over how to use the peer mark feature in Turnitin.com. If you don't have your article if you don't have your persuasive letter into Turnitin.com by 9 o'clock on Thursday, then your teacher can't set up peer mark for you to participate, which means you will not be able to peer edit anyone else's paper, and no one else will be able to look at yours and give you feedback. And that's really going to mess you up going forward. So that is a critical deadline that you do not want to miss. If you have any questions, as always, contact your particular teacher, and we look forward to seeing you in class on Tuesday.